What if everything we think we know about ancient history is missing a few crucial and utterly baffling pages, scattered across the globe, buried in the earth, or hidden in plain sight within museum archives, are objects that simply do not fit the established timeline of human achievement. These are not the predictable shards of pottery or the common tools we expect to find. These are anomalies. They are artifacts that possess a sophistication, a mystery, or an apparent technological understanding that stops historians and archaeologists in their tracks, forcing them to whisper questions about ancient astronauts, lost civilizations, or knowledge that was somehow erased from our collective memory. This is the powerful allure of the historical unknown, the tantalizing possibility that our past is far more complex and extraordinary than any textbook has ever dared to suggest. Today, we are embarking on a journey to examine 25 of the most mysterious ancient artifacts that defy all logical explanation. We will hold these enigmatic objects up to the light, exploring the incredible details that make them so controversial. You will encounter devices that appear to be complex astronomical calculators, crafted millennia before the scientific principles they embody were supposedly discovered. We will investigate maps carved with impossible accuracy, depicting coastlines that were hidden under miles of ice for thousands of years. We will look at intricate models of aircraft and figures adorned with what looks like modern-day protective gear, all created in an age we believed was dominated by simple tools and rudimentary technology. Each one of these relics is a puzzle piece that doesn't just challenge the picture on the box. It suggests we might be building an entirely different puzzle altogether. This exploration is more than just a list of strange old things. It is an investigation into the very limits of our knowledge. As we move through these 25 astonishing discoveries, you will be invited to become the detective. You will weigh the evidence, consider the orthodox explanations that often feel insufficient, and explore the more radical theories that attempt to fill the gaps in our understanding. The goal is not to provide definitive answers, but to open a door to a world of wonder and possibility. A world where the past is not a closed book but a living, breathing mystery waiting to be solved. So prepare to question what you've been taught, to feel the thrill of the unknown, and to see the footprints of ancient history in a startling new light. The story of humanity is far from complete, and the most compelling chapters may have been written in stone and metal, waiting centuries for us to finally understand their message. Our journey into the unexplained begins not in a dusty tomb or a hidden cave, but at the bottom of the sea. In the year 1900, sponge divers exploring a centuries-old shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera made a discovery that would take decades to even begin to understand. Among the statues and treasures, they recovered a heavily corroded lump of bronze and wood, so encrusted that it was initially overlooked. It was only years later, when the object cracked open, that researchers saw the gleam of precisely machined gear wheels inside. This unassuming lump, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, would eventually be recognized as one of the most technologically sophisticated objects to survive from the ancient world. What they had found was, in essence, a 2,000-year-old analog computer. Housed in a wooden case about the size of a shoebox, the device contained a complex clockwork of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. Inscriptions on the casing served as a user manual, and dials on the front and back displayed intricate information about the cosmos. By turning a hand crank, the user could advance the mechanism day by day, and it would accurately predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and likely the 5 known planets. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and it even accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon. This was not a simple calendar. It was a dynamic model of the heavens, a miniature universe powered by a system of gears whose complexity would not be matched until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe more than a millennium later. The existence of such a device in the 2nd century before the Common Era forces a dramatic re-evaluation of ancient Greek technological capabilities. This level of precision engineering, this profound understanding of astronomical cycles and mechanical physics, simply does not appear in any other artifact from that period. It stands as a lonely beacon of a technology that seems to have been lost for ages. So, who built it? While no name is inscribed on the mechanism, many historians point to the legendary inventor Archimedes of Syracuse, who was known to have constructed intricate orreries or models of the solar system. The Roman writer Cicero even described a device built by Archimedes that sounds remarkably similar, brought to Rome as war booty. Whether it was directly from his workshop or simply inspired by his ideas, the Antikythera Mechanism suggests a hidden chapter of scientific achievement, a level of sophistication that our history books are only now beginning to acknowledge. From the complex gears of a celestial computer, we travel now to a much simpler yet equally perplexing object, a small clay jar that might just rewrite the history of power itself. Discovered in the 1930s in the outskirts of modern-day Baghdad, this unassuming artifact, along with several others like it, dates back to the Parthian period around 2,000 years ago. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than an ancient storage vessel, roughly 5 inches tall, but its contents tell a different, more electrifying story. Inside the sealed clay jar, archaeologists found a copper cylinder, carefully soldered with a lead and tin alloy housing a single iron rod. The top of the jar was sealed with an asphalt plug, which also acted as an insulator, holding the iron rod perfectly in place without allowing it to touch the copper walls. This specific configuration, an acidic electrolyte between two different metals, is the fundamental recipe for a simple electric cell. The theory, first proposed by German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, is as startling as it is straightforward. If this jar were filled with a common acidic substance like vinegar or grape juice, a chemical reaction would occur. The acidic liquid would act as an electrolyte, facilitating a flow of electrons from the iron rod to the copper cylinder. The result, a small but measurable electric current generating about 1 volt of electricity. Now, 1 volt may not sound like much. It is less power than a standard A battery, but the implications are monumental. What could an ancient civilization have possibly needed with electricity? One compelling suggestion is electroplating, the process of using an electric current to bond a thin layer of one metal, like gold, onto the surface of another, such as silver. Artifacts from the same region show examples of very fine gold plating on silver objects, a technique that some experts argue would be incredibly difficult to achieve with known ancient methods, but becomes feasible with even a weak electrical current. Another, more speculative idea involves the use of electricity for religious or medicinal purposes. A mild electric shock applied to a person could have produced strange tingling sensations, potentially interpreted as a divine touch or a mystical experience during rituals. However, this ancient battery theory is met with significant and understandable skepticism from many mainstream archaeologists. The primary counter-argument is that these jars were far more likely simple storage containers for sacred scrolls. The iron rod, they suggest, was merely a handle around which a piece of valuable papyrus or parchment could be rolled, and the asphalt seal was just a practical way to keep the contents safe and dry from the elements. Proponents of this view point out that no wires or conductors have ever been found with these jars, and there are no contemporary texts or illustrations that even hint at a knowledge of electrical principles. For them, seeing a battery in this object is a classic case of modern interpretation being projected onto an ancient artifact, seeing what we want to see based on our own technological framework. The debate was fueled further by practical experiments. In the 1940s, an American experimenter named Willard Gray built a precise replica of the Baghdad jar, filled it with grape juice, and confirmed that it did indeed produce a low-voltage current. Later, other researchers connected several replicas together in a series, successfully generating enough voltage to electroplate a small silver object with gold. These experiments proved the object's potential function, but they could not prove its intended function. This is the central mystery that continues to captivate historians and scientists alike. The Baghdad Battery forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility that a basic form of electrochemistry might have been stumbled upon and utilized in a limited way, only for that knowledge to be lost, perhaps for centuries, leaving behind only these cryptic jars as silent, ambiguous clues. It stands as a powerful reminder that our ancestors were brilliant innovators, and we may still be underestimating the scope of their curiosity and their cleverness. Leaving behind the tangible mystery of ancient electricity, we now turn our attention to a puzzle made of ink and vellum, a book that is perhaps the most famous unreadable text in the world. Tucked away in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University is the Voynich Manuscript, a work that has stubbornly resisted interpretation for over 6 centuries. Its 240 pages are a gallery of the profoundly strange, filled from edge to edge with elegant, curling script in an alphabet that corresponds to no known language on Earth. This text flows seamlessly alongside illustrations that are both meticulously detailed and utterly bewildering, creating a sense of a world that is almost familiar yet unsettlingly alien. The manuscript is typically divided into sections based on its imagery, each more enigmatic than the last. The so-called herbal section features page after page of exquisitely drawn plants, but these are no ordinary specimens from a medieval garden. They are fantastical hybrids with roots that resemble animal organs, leaves that coil like serpents, and blossoms of impossible anatomy. Not a single one has been conclusively identified, leading to theories that they might be symbolic representations, the products of a dream, or perhaps even botanical knowledge from a continent unknown to Europe at the time. Then there are the astrological charts, circular diagrams adorned with miniature figures of the sun, moon, and stars, arranged in configurations that don't align with any recognized celestial system. But the most curiously intimate section is filled with illustrations of plump, naked women, often referred to as nymphs, bathing in interconnected pools and tubes of a vibrant green liquid. These diagrams look less like fantasy and more like a bizarre biological or alchemical schematic, suggesting a process far beyond the medical understanding of the Middle Ages. Who created this beautiful, baffling book, and why? The vellum has been radiocarbon dated to the early 15th century, placing its creation in northern Italy during the Renaissance. The most popular theory points to the English polymath Roger Bacon, or perhaps the eccentric Italian astrologer John Dee, but these are speculative guesses. Other explanations range from the plausible to the extraordinary. Some scholars have argued it is a very clever, centuries-old hoax, crafted to dupe a wealthy patron like Emperor Rudolph II, who reportedly purchased it for a hefty sum of 600 gold ducats. The hoax theory suggests the text is meaningless gibberish, designed to look like a language but containing no real information. Yet, statistical analysis of the script reveals patterns consistent with a genuine language, with word lengths and character repetition that mimic natural linguistic structures. This has fueled alternative ideas that it is a coded text full of alchemical or herbal secrets, written in a cipher so complex that even modern supercomputers cannot crack it. More fringe theories propose it is the work of a lost civilization or even extraterrestrial visitors, though these lack any credible evidence. The mystery has proven irresistible to codebreakers, from renowned World War II cryptographers who cracked enemy codes to contemporary artificial intelligence algorithms. For decades, each new claim of a breakthrough has sparked excitement, only to be subsequently debunked by the academic community. One recent study suggested the manuscript could be written in a form of extinct Proto-Romance language, with the words being abbreviations of Latin. but this theory has been widely criticized for its methodological flaws and inability to produce a coherent translation. Another proposal argued that the script is a phonetic transcription of the Turkish language, yet this, too, fails to make the text legible. The enduring failure to decipher a single, unequivocal sentence is what elevates the Voynich Manuscript from a simple curiosity to a profound historical enigma. It sits as a silent testament to a secret we have not yet earned the right to know, a book that offers untold knowledge on every page, if only we could understand the question it is asking. From the cryptic language of an unreadable book, we now turn to objects whose forms are instantly recognizable, yet their existence in the distant past seems to defy logic. Our next stop takes us to the sands of Egypt, where a small wooden artifact was discovered in 1898 during the excavation of a tomb near Saqqara, a burial ground that served the ancient Egyptian capital of Memphis. Dated to approximately 200 years before the Common Era, the object is known as the Saqqara bird. At first glance, and to most Egyptologists, it appears to be a stylized bird figurine, complete with a typical avian head and eyes. It is a charming, if simple, artifact, but when you shift your perspective, something remarkable happens. The craftsmanship, the angles of the wings, the precise shape of the body, it begins to look less like a bird and more like something entirely different, a modern glider or even a model airplane. This reinterpretation is not based on mere appearance alone. In the 1990s, a group of aviation enthusiasts and aerodynamics experts decided to put the Saqqara bird to the test. They constructed accurate scale models and subjected them to wind tunnel experiments. The results were startling. The models demonstrated genuine aerodynamic properties. The shape of the wings produced lift, and when a small horizontal stabilizer was added to the tail, a feature that some believe may have broken off the original artifact, the model exhibited remarkable stability in flight. It was not just a toy, it was, in effect, a functional glider design. This discovery fuels a tantalizing theory. Could the ancient Egyptians have possessed a rudimentary understanding of principles of flight? Proponents of this idea point to the absence of legs on the figurine, which is unusual for a bird depiction, and suggest it was always intended to be a model of a flying machine, perhaps used for ceremonial purposes or even as a child's toy based on a larger, understood concept. The mainstream academic view, however, remains firmly grounded. Egyptologists argue that the Saqqara bird is exactly what it appears to be, a bird, specifically a falcon, a creature deeply symbolic in Egyptian religion, often associated with the god Horus. They suggest that any aerodynamic properties are purely coincidental, a result of skilled artisans creating elegant, streamlined shapes that happen to align with principles we now understand through modern science. The missing tail fin, they contend, could have been a separate piece representing feathers, not an aerodynamic stabilizer. This clash of interpretations perfectly encapsulates the challenge of these ancient mysteries. Are we seeing a sophisticated technological blueprint, or are we projecting our modern world view onto an object that had a completely different, culturally specific meaning? The Saqqara bird sits at that crossroads, a silent wooden puzzle that challenges us to see the ancient world not as static, but as a place of unexpected and perhaps lost innovation. If the Saqqara bird represents a potential case of misinterpreted symbolism, our next artifact presents a mystery that is far more concrete and for a time seemed impossibly out of place. In the winter of 1961, 3 rockhound enthusiasts were searching for geodes near the summit of Coso Peak in California. They cracked open what they thought was a promising nodule, expecting to find the beautiful crystalline interior typical of a geode. Instead, they found something that made no geological sense whatsoever. Embedded firmly within the hard rock was a mechanical object. At its center was a metal rod surrounded by a ceramic collar, which was itself encased in a hexagonal copper shell. To anyone familiar with 20th century mechanics, the identification was immediate. It was a spark plug. The problem, however, was the context. The discoverers claimed the geode had formed around the object, a process that geologists stated would require an immense amount of time, potentially hundreds of thousands of years. This estimation launched the Coso Artifact into the realm of the truly fantastic. Here was a man-made object, a component of internal combustion engines, seemingly sealed inside a stone that predated modern humans by eons. Theories exploded, suggesting evidence of a prehistoric advanced civilization, visitors from other worlds, or a natural phenomenon that could accelerate the formation of mineral concretions. For a brief period, the artifact was a sensation among those who championed alternative histories. The mystery, however, began to unravel under closer scrutiny. Researchers from the Spark-Plug Collectors of America examined detailed photographs and identified the object as a champion spark plug from the 1920s, a model commonly used in Ford Model T and Model A engines. The ceramic collar was identified as a porcelain insulator, and the copper shell was the typical rust-resistant plating. The final blow to the ancient civilization theory came when the object itself was X-rayed, revealing a small metal spring inside, a component not present in the initial descriptions and a definitive mark of 20th century manufacturing. But this resolution left one perplexing question. How did a 1920s spark plug become so heavily mineralized that it was mistaken for a geode millions of years old? The most plausible explanation points to the unique conditions of its environment. The spark plug likely fell from a vehicle or was discarded near a natural hot spring. The mineral-rich waters, combined with layers of hardening clay and iron oxide, can form a concretion, a hard, rock-like shell around an object in a matter of decades, not millennia. The Coso artifact serves as a critical cautionary tale. It demonstrates how a combination of genuine surprise, a misunderstanding of geological processes, and a powerful desire to believe can create an apparently insoluble mystery from what is, in reality, a fascinating example of how quickly nature can reclaim our discarded technology. The story of the Coso artifact demonstrates how quickly nature can disguise a modern object, but what if the object in question is far simpler and the geological context even more challenging? Our next enigma, often called the London Hammer, presents a paradox that seems to defy the very foundations of geology and human history. The tale begins in the summer of 1936, when a couple hiking along the banks of Red Creek near the town of London, Texas, noticed a curious piece of rock that had fallen loose from a nearby outcrop. Protruding from the shattered stone was what appeared to be the unmistakable shape of a wooden hammer handle, leading to an iron hammer head. They took the strange find home, and it eventually found its way into the hands of creationist researchers who saw in it a powerful challenge to conventional science. The hammer itself is a relatively simple tool about 6 inches long. The head is made of iron, and chemical analysis has shown it to be of surprisingly pure quality, with a low sulfur content that suggests a sophisticated smelting process. The wooden handle is the real puzzle. It is partially coalified, meaning it has undergone a process of petrification, turning into a substance similar to coal. But the most astonishing aspect is the rock that encased it. Geologists who have examined the concretion, a hard, shell-like layer of limestone, iron oxide, and other minerals that formed around the object, have dated the rock formation itself to the Cretaceous period, an era that ended 66 million years ago, a time when dinosaurs roamed the Earth and humans would not appear for tens of millions of years. This creates an impossible timeline, a clearly human-made artifact sealed inside stone that predates humanity itself. Naturally, such a claim invites intense skepticism and demands a search for more rational explanations. The most widely accepted scientific view focuses on the unique ability of certain minerals to form concretions very rapidly under the right conditions. The theory proposes that the hammer was a relatively recent tool, perhaps from the 19th century, lost or discarded near a mineral-rich water source. Over a period of decades rather than millions of years, dissolved minerals like calcium carbonate and iron oxide could have precipitated out of the water, layer by layer, cementing sediments around the hammer and forming a solid, rock-hard nodule. This process can happen surprisingly fast, especially in areas with high mineral content, creating a convincing illusion of great antiquity. The partial coalification of the wood could also be explained by being buried in an environment rich in the right bacteria and minerals, a process that does not necessarily require geological time scales. Yet, for those who champion alternative histories, the London hammer remains a potent symbol. They argue that the concretion appears to be genuine Cretaceous rock, not a recent deposit, and that the rapid formation theory is a convenient way to dismiss uncomfortable evidence. This artifact has become a cornerstone for theories of time travel, suggesting a modern tool was somehow transported back to a primordial era and lost. Others see it as proof of an advanced prehistoric human civilization, a culture sophisticated enough to work iron that was wiped from the historical record by some cataclysm, with only a few of their tools surviving encased in stone. The London hammer, therefore, is more than just a rusty tool in a rock. It is a Rorschach test for how we interpret the past. It forces us to confront the reliability of our own methods for dating the ancient world and asks whether our current understanding of human history is complete, or if we are still missing monumental chapters that lie buried, waiting to be unearthed. From a hammer that challenges our timeline, we venture into a mystery that seems lifted directly from the pages of science fiction, a story that blurs the line between archaeology and interstellar myth. In 1938, an expedition led by archaeologist Kai Pute allegedly entered the remote Bayan Karaula Mountains on the border between China and Tibet. The story goes that they discovered a series of caves and inside found more than just ancient remains. They uncovered hundreds of strange stone discs, each about 9 inches in diameter, with a perfect hole in the center, resembling primitive phonograph records. Alongside these discs were the skeletons of small, fragile beings with unusually large skulls. But the truly extraordinary part of the tale was what was inscribed upon the stones, a continuous, microscopic groove that spiraled from the center to the outer edge, a groove that, upon closer inspection, was said to be a continuous line of tiny, unknown hieroglyphic writing. The narrative was catapulted into the Western world decades later by a man named Dr. Carroll Robin Evans, who presented himself as an Oxford-educated scholar and chiropractor. In 1962, he claimed to have acquired one of the discs and to have met with a surviving member of the mysterious Dropa people, the beings supposedly depicted in the cave. According to Robin Evans's account, which was later published in a book, a Chinese scientist named Professor Tsum Nui managed to translate the script in 1962. The translation told an astonishing story. It described how a spacecraft from a distant star system crashed in the Bayan Karaula Mountains 12,000 years ago. The survivors, the Dropa, were unable to repair their ship and found themselves stranded on Earth. The local Ham tribespeople initially viewed them with hostility, but over time the two groups learned to coexist. The stones, therefore, were not just artifacts, they were the recorded history of an extraterrestrial landing, a first-hand account of interstellar travelers becoming Earth's first refugees. Adding a layer of scientific intrigue to the story, Robin Evans and other proponents claimed that the discs were subjected to analysis. They reported that the stones contained high levels of cobalt and other metallic particles, and when connected to an oscillograph, they allegedly emitted a strange, rhythmic humming vibration, as if they held a stored electrical charge or some form of recorded data. This detail transformed the stones from simple carved records into potential alien data storage devices, a concept far ahead of its time in the 1960s. For believers, this was the smoking gun, physical evidence that supported the incredible narrative of a lost, non-human civilization. However, the entire edifice of the Dropa stone story crumbles under the weight of rigorous investigation. The scientific community overwhelmingly dismisses it as an elaborate hoax, and for compelling reasons. First and foremost, the primary figures in the story are unverifiable. There are no credible records of an archaeologist named Kai Pu-te leading such an expedition. The professor credited with the translation, Tsum Nui, is not a real name found in Chinese academic records. It appears to be a clumsy fabrication. Most damningly, the physical evidence itself has vanished. Not a single one of the hundreds of alleged discs resides in a museum or university collection available for modern scientific testing. The entire case is built on second-hand accounts, sensationalist magazine articles, and a book whose claims cannot be independently substantiated. The story of the Dropa stone serves as a fascinating case study in how modern myths are born. It combines several potent elements: the romance of a remote, unexplored location, the discovery of an unusual artifact, and a narrative that taps directly into the burgeoning popular fascination with flying saucers and ancient astronauts that define the mid-20th century. It is a prime example of an archaeological mystery that has been entirely absorbed into the realm of folklore and UFO mythology, a tale repeated so often in books and documentaries that it has gained a veneer of credibility despite a complete absence of factual foundations. The Dropa stones remind us that the allure of a fantastic past can sometimes be powerful enough to create its own reality, leaving behind a legacy not of stone and cobalt, but of enduring and irresistible speculation. After a story built on unverifiable myth, we now examine a tangible artifact whose secrets are printed plainly on parchment for all to see, yet its implications are no less extraordinary. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul rests a world map drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. The map itself is a beautiful work of art, but it is a small note in the admiral's own handwriting that unlocks its deepest mystery. Reis wrote that he had used a multitude of source maps to compile his work, including some that dated back to the time of Alexander the Great in the 4th century before the Common Era. This simple admission would be the key to a controversy that has raged for decades, because the Piri Reis map appears to depict a continent that no European or Ottoman explorer could have possibly known about in the 16th century, Antarctica. The most baffling section of the map shows a landmass extending northward from the bottom of the world. What makes this depiction so astonishing is the detail of the coastline. It is not the jagged, ice-choked shore we are familiar with today, but rather a smooth, navigable coastline with bays, inlets, and what look like river estuaries. This is precisely how the continent of Antarctica would appear if it were completely free of its massive ice cap, a condition that last existed millions of years ago. The map's rendering of the area known as Queen Maud Land is particularly accurate when compared to modern sub-ice sonar surveys of the bedrock beneath the Antarctic ice. The similarity is uncanny, suggesting the cartographer had access to knowledge of a landscape that has been hidden from human eyes for millennia. This impossibility has led to a compelling, if radical, theory. Proponents like the late Professor Charles Hapgood argue that the Piri Reis map is a copy of a copy, tracing its lineage back to a lost source civilization with advanced seafaring and cartographic skills. This civilization, perhaps the legendary Atlantis or another culture entirely unknown to history, would have had to explore the globe during a warm period in the distant past when Antarctica's coasts were temperate and ice-free. Their detailed maps, Hapgood suggested, were preserved in great libraries like Alexandria and were copied and recopied over centuries, their original origins forgotten, until fragments found their way into the hands of medieval and Renaissance mapmakers like Piri Reis. This idea pushes the timeline of human exploration back to an almost unimaginable antiquity, suggesting cycles of civilization rise and fall that we have yet to uncover. However, mainstream cartography offers a much more conservative yet equally fascinating explanation. Skeptics point out that the map is also filled with errors common to its time, and that the mysterious southern landmass could easily be a distorted, composite representation of the recently discovered coast of South America. When early explorers like Amerigo Vespucci mapped the eastern coast of South America, they did so in pieces, and these fragments could have been misaligned or stretched when compiled into a single world map. What appears to be Antarctica could instead be the Patagonian coast of Argentina, twisted and extended downward. This interpretation argues that the apparent accuracy of the Antarctic coastline is a classic case of pareidolia, the human tendency to see meaningful patterns like a familiar shape in random or ambiguous data. When you look at the Peary Rise map with the assumption that it only contains knowledge from 1513, the southern continent becomes a messy, though ambitious, attempt to fill in the blanks of a world that was still largely unknown to European and Ottoman geographers. So where does the truth lie? The debate often centers on side-by-side comparisons. When you place the outline of the Peary Rise map next to a modern satellite image of Antarctica with the ice removed, the contours of the coast do indeed show a remarkable correspondence in several key areas. The problem is that the map is also wrong in other places. It connects this land to South America in a way that is geographically impossible. This mixture of stunning accuracy and glaring error is the heart of the enigma. It either supports the idea that Rise was clumsily patching together ancient, precise source maps with more recent, imperfect ones, or it confirms that he was simply doing his best with the incomplete and often contradictory explorer reports available to him. The Peary Rise map refuses to yield a simple answer. It stands as a permanent question mark on the history of exploration, a tantalizing hint that the great ages of discovery we celebrate in our history books may have been preceded by others whose maps have been lost to time, leaving behind only cryptic copies that challenge everything we think we know about our planet's past. Leaving behind the world of maps and manuscripts, we now ascend high above the earth to witness an ancient mystery on a scale so vast it can only be comprehended from the sky. Carved into the stark, arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca lines are a gallery of giants, a collection of hundreds of geoglyphs that transform the desert floor into an immense and enigmatic canvas. Created by the Nazca culture between 500 before the Common Era and 500 of the Common Era, these are not small artifacts to be held in the hand, but monumental designs that stretch across nearly 200 square miles. The figures are breathtaking in their variety and precision. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, a sinuous monkey with a spiraling tail, a colossal spider, and an orca, all drawn with a single continuous line. Alongside these biomorphic shapes are geometric forms, trapezoids, triangles, and straight lines that run arrows straight for miles, cutting across the landscape with impossible accuracy. The central and most compelling question is why? Why would a people without the ability to fly create art that was fundamentally invisible to them? The most enduring theory, championed by the German mathematician and archaeologist Maria Reich, who devoted her life to the lines, posits an astronomical and calendrical purpose. Reich believed the lines functioned as a giant astronomical calendar, with certain figures and lines aligning with the rising and setting points of the sun, moon, and significant stars during solstices and equinoxes. This celestial map, she argued, would have helped the Nazca people track the seasons for agricultural and ritual purposes. Another prominent theory suggests a deep connection to water, a precious and scarce resource in the desert. According to this view, the geoglyphs were ritual pathways walked by priests during ceremonies to summon life-giving water from deities. The spider, for instance, is a symbol of rain in some Andean traditions, and the hummingbird is associated with the arrival of rain. The act of walking the lines was itself a form of prayer, a physical manifestation of a plea for survival. Of course, the most sensational explanation was popularized by Swiss author Erich von Däniken, who proposed in the 1960s that the Nazca lines were landing strips or navigational aids for ancient astronauts. He argued that the long, straight lines and wide trapezoids resembled modern runways, and the giant figures could have been signals visible from spacecraft in orbit. While this idea captures the imagination, archaeologists point out the ground is too soft to support heavy landing craft, and the theory dismisses the sophisticated cultural and religious world of the Nazca people, reducing their incredible achievement to a message for extraterrestrial visitors. The how of their creation is almost as mystifying as the why. The Nazca people achieved this feat with simple tools and an ingenious understanding of their environment. The desert floor is covered in a layer of dark, rust-colored stones rich in iron oxide. By removing these top stones, the Nazca exposed the lighter, sandy soil beneath. This stark contrast created the visible lines. The real genius, however, lay in their surveying technique. Researchers believe they used a system of stakes and ropes to create small-scale models on a grid system, which they then scaled up to immense proportions. They could have built simple observation platforms on hillsides to oversee portions of the work, but the full, cohesive image of a figure like the 300-foot-long condor would have been impossible for them to see. They were working on faith and precision, trusting the mathematical process to result in a perfect form that only the gods, or perhaps the condor itself flying high above, could truly appreciate. The line's remarkable preservation for over 2,000 years is a testament to the unique climate of the Nazca Desert. The region is one of the driest on Earth, with minimal rainfall and almost no wind. This stability has protected the fragile designs from erosion, leaving them almost exactly as their creators left them centuries ago. The work of Maria Reich was instrumental in protecting this fragile site from modern threats, as she fought tirelessly against encroaching development and careless visitors. Today, the Nazca lines remain a powerful symbol of human ingenuity and a profound mystery. They represent a civilization's desire to make a permanent mark on the world, to communicate with the heavens, and to create something of such scale and beauty that its true meaning continues to hover just beyond our reach, visible only when we rise high enough to see the entire picture. In the shadow of grand speculations about lost civilizations, we find a more subtle but equally captivating mystery. A scattering of artifacts that point to brief, accidental meetings between worlds long before they were officially introduced. The idea of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact, the possibility that European or other travelers reached the Americas centuries before Christopher Columbus, is a historical puzzle that hinges on a few enigmatic finds. These objects are not as flashy as a celestial computer or as vast as desert geoglyphs, but their implications are profound, suggesting that the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans may have been crossed by intrepid voyagers whose stories were lost to time. We now turn our attention to 3 such artifacts, each telling a fragment of a story that challenges the traditional narrative of discovery. Our first piece of evidence is perhaps the most straightforward and widely accepted. In 1957, during an archaeological dig at the Goddard site, a prolific Native American trading village on the coast of Maine, researchers uncovered a small, weathered silver coin. It was identified as a Norwegian penny, minted during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre between 1067 and 1093. This is the famous Maine penny, a genuine 11th century Norse artifact found in a context that dates it to at least 200 years before Columbus set sail. The coin itself is not a mystery, its origin is certain. The enigma lies in how it arrived in Maine. The only confirmed Norse settlement in North America is at Elance Oaks Meadows on the northern tip of Newfoundland, a site occupied for perhaps only a decade around the year 1000. The discovery of a Norse coin over 1,000 miles to the south suggests that Viking explorers may have ventured much further down the eastern seaboard than previously believed, either on purposeful exploration or driven by storms, establishing fleeting contact and engaging in trade with indigenous peoples. While the authenticity of the coin is not in doubt, its significance is carefully debated. Skeptics propose an alternative route for its journey down the line trade. Instead of a Norse explorer handing the coin directly to a Wabanaki trader in Maine, it could have been passed from tribe to tribe over generations, moving slowly south from a Norse settlement through indigenous trade networks that stretched across the continent. This would mean the coin could have arrived in Maine long after the Norse had abandoned their North American ventures. Proponents of direct contact, however, find this less likely, arguing that a single, low-value silver coin would be an unusual item to travel so far when more valuable trade goods like furs or copper would be more typical. The Maine penny remains a tantalizing clue, a solitary data point that hints at a wider, yet undocumented Norse presence in the Americas, a whisper of exploration that history failed to record in any saga. From the cold waters of the North Atlantic, we journey to the warm highlands of central Mexico for an artifact that, if genuine, would rewrite history in an even more dramatic fashion. In the early 1930s, a burial was uncovered at the Tlaxcala site, dating to a time before the Spanish conquest. Among the grave goods was a small terracotta head, barely 2 inches tall, with a beard and a hairstyle that is unmistakably Roman in appearance. The style of the head has been compared to artifacts from the Roman Empire from around the 2nd century of the Common Era. The burial site was sealed beneath an undisturbed layer, and thermoluminescence dating of the head itself later confirmed its antiquity, placing its creation between the 9th century and the 13th century, still centuries before Columbus. The implication is staggering. Could a Roman vessel have crossed the Atlantic, or could a Roman individual have somehow made their way to the New World, influencing local art over 1,000 years before the Spanish arrived? The case for the Tlaxcala head's authenticity is built on its sound archaeological context and the scientific dating. It was not a surface find. It was excavated by a professional archaeologist from a sealed grave, making a modern hoax seem less probable. Yet the skepticism is fierce and multifaceted. Critics point out that the head is a complete anomaly. No other Roman-style artifacts have been found anywhere in the pre-Columbian Americas. They argue it could be a post-colonial intrusion, perhaps dropped by a later settler into an animal burrow that then became mixed with the older layers, a known problem in archaeology. Another theory suggests it could be a hoax perpetrated by the excavators themselves in the early 20th century, a time when such sensational finds could bring fame and funding. The head style, while Romanesque, is not perfectly identical to any known Roman artifact, leaving room for doubt. It stands as an incredible outlier, an object so out of place that it demands extraordinary evidence, evidence that, so far, has not been forthcoming beyond the single head itself. Perhaps the most controversial piece in this transoceanic puzzle is the Kensington runestone. In 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Öhman claimed to have discovered a large 200-pound slab of greywacke stone tangled in the roots of a tree on his farm near Kensington, Minnesota. Carved into its face was an inscription in runes, the ancient Germanic alphabet, purportedly telling a harrowing story. The text, dated to the year 1362, describes an expedition of 8 Goths or Swedes and 22 Norwegians on a journey of exploration from Vinland who made camp nearby. It chillingly recounts that 10 men were red with blood and dead, suggesting a violent encounter, and concludes with a plea for rescue. If authentic, the Kensington runestone would be proof of a Norse expedition deep into the heart of North America, over a century after the Vikings had left their Newfoundland settlement and a full 130 years before Columbus. The problem is that the academic community has almost universally dismissed the stone as a clever, late 19th century hoax. Linguists and rhunologists have identified several critical flaws in the inscription. The runes used are a mixture of styles from different time periods, and the language contains modern Swedish elements and grammatical constructions that would not have been used in the 14th century. The very date, written as 1362, is argued to be an anachronism, as medieval Norse people did not typically use this dating format. Furthermore, the stone was discovered by a poor immigrant in an area densely populated by other Scandinavian immigrants, a community steeped in pride for their Viking heritage and well-versed in the popular runic texts of the day. The motive for a hoax, to claim a heroic Viking past for the new Scandinavian American community, seems plausible. Despite the scholarly consensus, the Kensington runestone has passionate defenders who point to geological evidence. They argue that the weathering of the inscription appears ancient, and that the specific type of moss growing in the carved letters suggests great age. These claims, however, have not swayed the majority of experts. The stone remains a powerful cultural icon, a testament to the desire to connect with a romanticized past, even if the evidence for its authenticity is deeply fraught. Together, these three artifacts, the genuine but ambiguous Maine penny, the baffling but solitary Roman head, and the widely disputed runestone, form a fascinating triangle of evidence. They do not conclusively prove sustained pre-Columbian contact, but they keep the door open to the possibility of sporadic, accidental journeys. They remind us that the oceans may not have been the impenetrable barriers we imagine, and that history is often more messy and more interesting than the clean timelines we find in textbooks. From whispers of ancient voyages and enigmatic stones, we now turn to an object that lies at the very intersection of faith, history, and science, an artifact that has inspired both deep devotion and intense skepticism for centuries. Housed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, the shroud is a 14-foot-long linen cloth that bears the haunting, faint, sepia-toned image of a man who appears to have suffered the torturous death of crucifixion. The figure shows wounds consistent with the biblical account of Jesus of Nazareth, scourge marks across the back, punctures from a crown of thorns on the head, a lance wound in the chest, and nail wounds in the wrists and feet. For millions of believers, this is not merely a representation. It is the actual burial shroud of Christ, a sacred relic that captured his image at the moment of resurrection. For skeptics, it is the most sophisticated and enduring hoax in history. The debate surrounding it is unlike any other, fueled by scientific investigations that have, rather than providing clarity, only deepened the mystery. The shroud's documented history begins in the 14th century in the French town of Liéry, where it was displayed by a knight named Geoffroy de Charny. Its origins before that are shrouded in speculation, with some proponents suggesting it was the same cloth known as the image of Edessa, or Mandylion, a legendary relic said to have been used to wipe the face of Jesus, which vanished after the sack of Constantinople in the 13th century. The cloth's survival is a story in itself. In 1532, it was damaged by a fire in the chapel where it was kept, melting the silver casket that housed it and leaving a series of symmetrical burn marks and water stains that are still visible on the fabric today. This narrow escape only added to its aura of sanctity and resilience. The single most pivotal moment in the modern history of the shroud came in the late 1980s, when the Vatican granted permission for a small sample to be subjected to radiocarbon dating. The process was designed to be definitive. 3 independent laboratories at the University of Oxford, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology each received pieces of the same sample. Their results, announced in 1988, were remarkably consistent. They dated the linen of the shroud to a period between 1260 and 1390. For many, this was the final word. The shroud was a medieval creation, a forgery from the very era when the trade in religious relics was at its peak. The scientific method had seemingly settled the centuries-old debate, but instead of closing the case, the carbon dating ignited a new and furious scientific controversy. Almost immediately, critics of the results pointed to potential problems. They argued that the sample taken came from a corner of the shroud that had been handled extensively over the centuries, and more importantly, was likely part of a patch woven in by nuns to repair the fire damage from 1532. This theory of an invisible reweave, however, has been difficult to prove. Other researchers suggested that contamination from the fire itself, the intense heat could have introduced younger carbon isotopes into the ancient linen, could have skewed the results significantly. The debate over the carbon dating continues to this day, with papers being published both defending the original methodology and proposing sophisticated contamination models that could theoretically push the date back to the 1st century. The scientific community remains largely in favor of the medieval date, but the lingering questions have left just enough room for doubt to keep the mystery alive. Beyond the question of its age lies an even more profound puzzle, one that no one, skeptic or believer, has been able to adequately solve. How was the image created? The image on the shroud is not a painting. There are no pigments, no brushstrokes, no substances applied to the linen threads. Instead, the image is a superficial discoloration, only a few fibers deep, affecting the very topmost threads of the cloth. It possesses astonishingly accurate three-dimensional information. When the light and dark values of the image are fed into a device called a VP8 image analyzer, which interprets shades of gray as topographical relief, it produces a perfectly coherent three-dimensional sculpture of a human face and body. This is a characteristic utterly unique in the world of art. No painting or drawing, medieval or modern, contains such encoded data. This has led to a bewildering array of theories. Medieval forgery proponents have suggested everything from a primitive form of photography using a camera obscura and silver compounds to a simple rubbing technique using a bas-relief statue. Yet, no one has been able to successfully replicate all the chemical and physical properties of the shroud's image using only materials and knowledge available in the 1300s. The image's precision, its lack of directionality, and its existence as a purely surface-level phenomenon defy these explanations. On the other side, those who argue for a miraculous origin propose that a brief, intense burst of energy, perhaps at the moment of resurrection, caused a dehydration and oxidation of the linen fibers, effectively burning the image onto the cloth through a process resembling a controlled scorch. While this aligns with the beliefs of the faithful, it remains by its very nature outside the realm of testable science. The Shroud of Turin, therefore, endures as perhaps the ultimate historical enigma. It is an object that challenges the limits of both empirical investigation and human belief, a silent testament to an event that, regardless of its origin, continues to captivate and confound the world. Imagine holding a small, fired clay disc in your hand and realizing you are looking at a message from a civilization that vanished over 3,000 years ago, a message that no one alive today can read. This is the essence of the Phaistos disc, an artifact that is as beautiful as it is baffling. Discovered in 1908 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier in the ruins of the Minoan Palace of Phaistos on the Greek island of Crete, the disc dates back to the 2nd millennium before the Common Era, a time when the Minoan civilization was at its height. Unlike any other object found before or since, the disc is about 6 inches in diameter and features a continuous spiral of mysterious symbols on both of its sides. These are not symbols carved by hand. They were stamped into the soft clay with individual seals, like a printer using a set of pre-made punches. This single fact makes the Phaistos disc one of the most technologically unique objects in the ancient world, because it represents an early form of movable type printing, a technology that would not appear in China for another 2,000 years and in Europe for another 3,000. The script itself consists of 241 tokens made from 45 distinct signs. These symbols are a captivating mix of recognizable figures and abstract marks. You can see a helmeted head, a captive with his arms bound behind his back, a ship, a beehive, a bird in flight, and a fish. Because these symbols resemble Egyptian hieroglyphs, the script is often called Cretan hieroglyphic, but it is a writing system entirely unique to Crete. The text spirals from the outer edge toward the center, and small slashes were made to divide the symbols into what appear to be groups of words or phrases. The fact that the symbols were made with punches suggests this was not a one-off artistic creation. It implies the existence of a whole set of such punches, and perhaps an established system for producing multiple documents. Yet, in over a century of excavation across Crete and the wider Mediterranean, not one other example of this script or any of the punches used to create it has ever been found. The Phaistos disc is a solitary, stunning anomaly. This isolation is the core of the mystery. Why would such a sophisticated technology appear only once and then vanish without a trace? The most logical explanation is that other documents made from this system simply did not survive. They could have been written on perishable materials like parchment, papyrus, or wax tablets, which would have decayed over the centuries. The disc itself only survived because it was baked hard, possibly in the fire that destroyed the palace. But the absence of any other stamped clay tablets or the tools used to make them remains a profound puzzle. It forces us to consider whether the disc was an import from another, unknown culture, or perhaps the brilliant invention of a single individual, a technological flash in the pan that was lost when the Minoan palaces fell into decline. Naturally, the inability to read the text has fueled countless attempts at decipherment. Over the years, scholars, amateur linguists, and enthusiasts have proposed a dizzying array of translations. Some believe the disc contains a religious hymn or a prayer to a Minoan goddess. Others argue it is a legal document, perhaps a treaty or a list of land grants. Given the maritime nature of the Minoans, some theories suggest it could be a cargo manifest or a navigational guide. One particularly intricate theory posits that the disc is a complex geometric theorem, while another sees it as an ancient board game with the spiral representing the path of play. The problem with every single one of these translations is that they are unverifiable. Without a bilingual text, a Rosetta Stone for the Minoan world, or a much larger corpus of examples to compare it to, any proposed decipherment remains in the realm of speculation. The disc is a locked door for which we have not yet found the key, and every attempt to pick the lock has so far failed. The mystery only deepens when we consider the disc's potential connections. Some of its symbols bear a vague resemblance to those found on other Minoan artifacts, particularly seals, but the writing system as a whole does not match the island's other known scripts, Linear A and Linear B. Linear B was successfully deciphered in the 1950s and was shown to be an early form of Greek, used for administrative records by the Mycenaeans who later occupied Crete. Linear A, the script it evolved from, remains undeciphered. While a few signs on the Phaistos disc look similar to Linear A characters, the systems are fundamentally different. This has led to a fierce debate. Is the disc an example of a totally separate, parallel writing system used on Crete, or is it simply a very ornate and unique presentation of a known script? The lack of a second example makes answering this question impossible. The Phaistos disc stands as a monumental challenge to our understanding of ancient communication. It is a whisper of a lost language, a glimpse of a technology that seems impossibly ahead of its time, and a permanent reminder that the ancient world still holds secrets that may never be fully revealed. But after examining objects designed to be held or read, the mystery of human ingenuity expands to an architectural scale that is almost incomprehensible. High above the modern city of Cusco, Peru, lies the archaeological fortress of Sacsayhuaman, a site that defies not just explanation, but the very limits of what we believe possible with ancient technology. Here, the Inca civilization constructed walls that are less a feat of construction and more a form of stone puzzle work on a colossal scale. Imagine blocks of limestone so enormous that they dwarf the people standing beside them, some weighing well over 100 tons, the equivalent of a large military tank. Yet, it is not their size alone that astounds visitors and experts alike. It is the mind-bending precision with which these gigantic stones were joined together. The edges of each irregular polygonal block are carved with a complexity that seems to mock modern engineering. They fit against their neighbors so perfectly that, for centuries, it has been said you cannot force the thin blade of a razor into the seams. This is not simple masonry. It is a form of three-dimensional stone knitting, creating walls that have withstood centuries of earthquakes that have toppled the Spanish colonial buildings constructed on top of them. The fundamental question is how this was achieved. The Inca, by all historical accounts, lacked several technologies we consider essential for such work. They had no knowledge of the wheel for transportation, no draft animals stronger than the llama, which cannot carry heavy loads, and they worked without iron tools, using only stone hammers, bronze chisels, and other simple implements. So how did they quarry these behemoths from mountainsides miles away, transport them across rugged valleys, and then sculpt them with such hair-splitting accuracy? The mainstream archaeological explanation is one of breathtaking organization and patience. It is believed that workers used stone hammers to pound natural fracture lines in the bedrock, slowly and meticulously quarrying each block over a period of months. To move them, they likely employed a system of log rollers, earthen ramps, and the sheer muscle power of thousands of laborers, pulling the stones with ropes made from leather and plant fibers. The final shaping, theorists suggest, was a process of trial and error. A block would be lowered into place and its contact points would be marked with a colored pigment. It would then be hoisted again, and the high spots would be painstakingly pecked away with stone tools before the block was set down once more. This iterative process, repeated over and over, could theoretically result in the impeccable fits we see today, a testament to an almost superhuman level of communal effort and persistence. For many, however, the conventional explanation feels inadequate, failing to account for the sheer speed and perfection of the work, especially considering the scale of the entire complex. This has given rise to more speculative theories that attempt to fill the gaps. One fascinating idea involves the concept of a softening agent. Some researchers point to local legends and a few colonial chronicles that mention a special plant whose juice, when applied to stone, could make it temporarily soft and malleable like clay. If such a plant existed, it would solve the mystery elegantly. The Inca could have quarried and shaped the stones with relative ease, and the rock would harden again after being positioned, creating a seamless bond. While no such plant has been definitively identified, it speaks to the possibility of a lost botanical knowledge. More esoteric theories venture into the realm of sound. Stories have circulated for decades about the Inca possessing the secret of acoustic levitation. According to this idea, priests or engineers used specific chants, drums, or other instruments to generate sound waves at a precise resonant frequency that would cancel out the effects of gravity, allowing the massive stones to be lifted and floated into place as if they were weightless. These theories, while captivating, remain firmly in the realm of legend without any physical or archaeological evidence to support them. Of course, the most famous alternative explanation is the ancient astronaut hypothesis, which proposes that such impossible construction was accomplished with the help of advanced extraterrestrial technology. Proponents argue that the precision is too great, the blocks too large for mere human effort, and that the zigzag pattern of the walls, which some say resembles lightning bolts, could be a clue to an advanced energy source. While this idea captures the popular imagination, most archaeologists dismiss it as not only lacking evidence but also as a disservice to the incredible ingenuity of the Inca people. They argue that the solution is not to look to the stars but to re-evaluate our own understanding of human capability. The walls of Sacsayhuaman were not built by magic or aliens, but by one of the most organized societies in history, a culture that mastered terracing, road building, and astronomy without any of the technologies we take for granted. The mystery, therefore, may not be a technological one, but a social one. How did they coordinate such a vast workforce with such a singular vision? The site stands as a permanent monument to a different way of seeing the world, one where stone was not an obstacle to be conquered, but a partner to be understood, shaped by a civilization whose full capabilities we are still struggling to measure. While we often marvel at the colossal stone structures left behind by ancient cultures, our next artifact demonstrates that sometimes the most astonishing engineering feats are achieved not on a massive scale, but through an almost alchemical mastery of materials. In the Qut complex in Delhi, India, stands a silent sentinel that has baffled scientists and historians for centuries, the Iron Pillar of Delhi. Soaring 23 feet high and weighing over 6 tons, this formidable column of wrought iron is not remarkable for its size alone, but for its seemingly impossible condition. For approximately 1,600 years, through scorching heat, torrential monsoon rains, and the relentless pollution of a modern metropolis, this pillar has remained almost completely free of rust. It is a defiance of one of nature's most fundamental laws, the tendency of iron to return to its oxidized state. This isn't just an old piece of metal, it's a living testament to a lost scientific art, a technology so advanced that we are only now beginning to comprehend its brilliance. The secret to the pillar's longevity lies not in magic, but in its unique chemical composition, a recipe that ancient Indian ironsmiths perfected through centuries of metallurgical experimentation. Modern spectroscopic analysis has revealed that the iron used is of exceptional purity, with a very low carbon content, making it a high-quality wrought iron. But the true genius is the inclusion of an unusually high percentage of phosphorus, nearly 1%, which is about 4 times the amount found in modern iron. This was not a lucky accident. It is believed the smiths achieved this by smelting the iron ore with charcoal, a process that naturally introduces phosphorus from the fuel into the molten metal. This specific chemical cocktail is the key to the pillar's resilience. Over time, the phosphorus, along with iron and oxygen from the air, has formed an incredibly thin, continuous, and protective film on the pillar's surface known as a passive layer. This layer, just a few hundred microns thick, thinner than a human hair, acts as an invisible shield. It actively prevents moisture and pollutants from penetrating the metal beneath, effectively putting a halt to the corrosive chemical reactions that would normally cause any other iron object to crumble into reddish-brown flakes over a much shorter period. This understanding, however, only deepens the core mystery. How did ancient metalworkers over a millennium and a half ago possess such a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy that they could intentionally engineer a rust-proof alloy? They left behind no textbooks or chemical formulas. Their knowledge was likely passed down through generations of guilds in a purely practical, oral tradition, a hands-on wisdom gained from countless cycles of trial and observation. They may have noticed that iron produced with certain types of charcoal or from specific mines lasted longer, and they refined their techniques accordingly. The real enigma is that this specific, successful formula appears to have been lost. Other iron artifacts from the same period and region have not survived in such pristine condition, suggesting that the creation of the Delhi pillar was the pinnacle of a specialized craft that, for reasons unknown, was not replicated or was eventually forgotten. It stands as a solitary masterpiece of applied chemistry, a product of an empirical science that was far ahead of its time. The pillar's near indestructibility is made even more poignant by the beautiful Sanskrit inscriptions that adorn its surface. These verses, written in the Gupta period script, glorify a king named Chandra, who is widely believed to be Chandragupta II, one of the most powerful rulers of the Gupta Empire. The inscription celebrates his military conquests, comparing his valor to the sun. It is a powerful juxtaposition, a poetic tribute to a king's transient glory, etched onto a material object that has achieved a form of physical immortality. The pillar was originally erected at a place called Vishnupatagiri, often identified with Udayagiri, and was likely dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. It was only centuries later, after the Islamic conquests of Delhi, that it was moved to its current location and incorporated into the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque complex. Its survival through these turbulent cultural shifts adds another layer to its story, transforming it from a religious monument into a universal symbol of enduring human achievement. For modern science, the Iron Pillar has become a benchmark and a source of profound respect. It was only in the late 20th century, with the advent of advanced analytical tools like X-ray diffraction and electron microscopy, that researchers were able to fully decode the corrosion-resistant mechanism of the phosphorus-rich passive layer. This ancient artifact, in a sense, taught us something new about material science. It demonstrated a principle that modern engineers strive to emulate when developing stainless steels and protective coatings for everything from skyscrapers to spacecraft. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, therefore, is not merely a relic to be admired for its age. It is a peerless example of ancient innovation, a silent teacher that continues to offer lessons in durability and ingenuity, challenging our assumptions about the technological capabilities of the ancient world and reminding us that some of the most profound secrets are not hidden in cryptic codes, but are written plainly in the enduring language of metal and time. Leaving behind the engineered perfection of rust-resistant iron, we now journey into the lush, tropical landscape of Central America, where an entirely different kind of precision awaits. Deep within the Diquis Delta of Costa Rica, hidden for centuries beneath the jungle floor, lies a collection of objects so geometrically perfect they seem almost unnatural. These are the stone spheres of Costa Rica, or petrospheres, and they represent one of the most visually striking and perplexing archaeological puzzles in the Americas. Numbering nearly 300, these spheres are scattered across the region, with sizes ranging from small, handheld stones just a few centimeters across to colossal orbs over 2 meters in diameter, weighing several tons. The largest of them are so massive that they feel less like artifacts and more like permanent features of the landscape, as if some giant had been playing a game of marbles and simply walked away. What makes these spheres so astonishing is their incredible craftsmanship. They are carved from a hard, unforgiving igneous rock called granodiorite, a material similar to granite. Despite the toughness of the stone and the presumed simplicity of the tools available, primarily other stones, the spheres exhibit a near-flawless roundness. Their surfaces are remarkably smooth, with a consistency that rivals what could be achieved with modern machining. This level of precision, achieved by a pre-Columbian people from around 600 to 1500 of the Common Era, is a testament to an almost obsessive dedication to geometric perfection. The creators, likely from the Kyrikwi culture or their ancestors, invested an immense amount of time and effort into shaping these stones, but they left behind no written records or clear instructions explaining why. This is the central, haunting question. What was their purpose? Without any archaeological context, we are left to piece together theories from the sphere's placement and what we know of the cultures that made them. One compelling idea is that they served as astronomical markers. Some of the spheres were found arranged in alignments that correspond to celestial events, such as the rising and setting of the sun during solstices or the positions of significant stars. In this view, the spheres could have functioned as a giant, open-air calendar, helping to regulate agricultural cycles and religious ceremonies tied to the cosmos. Another prominent theory suggests they were powerful status symbols. The size and number of spheres associated with a particular dwelling or public space might have denoted the social rank, wealth, and influence of a chief or a family. In this scenario, the spheres were less about utility and more about projecting power and prestige, a permanent and immovable display of a leader's authority for all to see. A third, more practical theory proposes they were used to mark territorial boundaries, important trade routes, or sacred burial grounds, acting as silent sentinels that define the cultural and physical landscape. However, the greatest mystery is not just why they were made, but how. The process of transforming a rough, irregular boulder of granodiorite into a perfect sphere using only stone hammers, fire, and water is a feat that boggles the mind. Archaeologists and stonemasons who have attempted to replicate the process believe it was a multi-stage endeavor that required incredible skill and patience. First, the large boulder would be roughly shaped by repeatedly heating it with fire and then rapidly cooling it with water, causing the outer layers to crack and flake away. Then, using hammerstones made of an even harder material like quartz, artisans would painstakingly peck away at the surface, gradually refining the shape. The final stage would involve grinding the sphere with sand and water to achieve that breathtakingly smooth finish. This entire process for a single large sphere could have taken a team of workers many years, a staggering investment of labor for an object with no apparent practical use. Tragically, the opportunity to solve these mysteries was severely compromised in the 20th century. When the spheres were rediscovered in the 1930s during the clearing of land for banana plantations, they were seen by many as mere curiosities or, worse, as potential hiding places for gold. Treasure hunters, fueled by legend, used bulldozers and dynamite to roll the spheres away from their original positions, cracking them open in the futile search for hidden treasure. This destructive rampage irrevocably destroyed the sphere's archaeological context. We will never know how they were originally arranged, what structures they might have been associated with, or what artifacts were buried alongside them. This loss is immeasurable. The original placement of the spheres was likely the key to understanding their true function. Now they sit like silent, displaced giants, their secrets locked within their perfect forms, a permanent reminder of how quickly the clues to our past can be lost to carelessness and greed. Descending from the architectural wonders of human hands, we encounter an object so small and seemingly simple that its mystery is almost microscopic, yet its implications are as vast as geological time itself. Our next artifact takes us to the mines of South Africa, where workers extracting the mineral-rich rock of the Precambrian strata began uncovering peculiar metallic objects. These are the so-called Klerksdorp spheres, named for the museum that now houses several of them. They are small, most ranging from a few millimeters to a couple of centimeters in diameter, but what they lack in size they more than make up for in controversy. Their appearance is instantly striking. They are almost perfectly spherical balls and sometimes flattened discs, and many are encircled by 1, 2, 3, or even more fine, parallel grooves running neatly around their equator. They are composed of a nickel-steel alloy, a material that does not form naturally in such a pure state, and they are found embedded within a mineral deposit known as pyrophyllite, which has been dated to an astonishing 2.8 billion years old. To put that age into perspective, this is a time when the only life on Earth was single-celled organisms in the primordial seas, a billion years before the first complex multicellular life would even begin to evolve. The immediate and startling question is how such a seemingly manufactured object could exist in a world devoid of any life forms capable of tool use, let alone metallurgy. The most compelling aspect for those who see these spheres as out-of-place artifacts is their uncanny symmetry and those precise grooves. The grooves are so straight, so parallel, that they appear machined, as if crafted by a lathe or some other precision tool. This level of geometric perfection is incredibly rare in the natural world, and it naturally leads to extraordinary theories. Proponents of alternative history suggest that the Klerksdorp spheres could be evidence of a non-human, technologically advanced civilization that existed on Earth long before humanity. a civilization whose entire existence was wiped clean by the immense span of geological time, leaving behind only these minuscule, durable clues. Others, looking even further afield, have proposed they could be components from ancient spacecraft or navigational tools left behind by interstellar visitors. These ideas tap into a deep fascination with the possibility of a hidden prehistory, a world where intelligent life rose and fell in epochs we can scarcely imagine. However, the mainstream scientific community offers a much more down-to-earth explanation, one rooted in the slow, patient processes of geology. Geologists identify the spheres as natural formations known as pyrite concretions. Pyrite, often called fool's gold, is an iron sulfide mineral that can crystallize in a variety of shapes. Under specific conditions, particularly in the soft, fine-grained sediments of volcanic ash or clay where these spheres are found, pyrite can precipitate out of mineral-rich water, slowly accumulating around a central nucleus, perhaps a grain of sand or a fossil, to form a spherical concretion. The process is similar to how a pearl forms around an irritant inside an oyster. But what about those impossibly precise grooves? This is where the science becomes truly fascinating. Geologists point to the crystalline structure of pyrite itself. Pyrite crystals belong to the cubic crystal system, and they have a natural tendency to grow in a highly ordered geometric fashion. As the concretion formed over millions of years, the internal crystal structure could have influenced the external shape, creating the ridges and grooves as a natural byproduct of the mineral's growth patterns, not through any form of machining. Some specimens even show evidence of laminar growth, with layers of different mineral compositions creating the appearance of distinct grooves. This geological explanation is a classic application of Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest solution with the fewest assumptions is usually the correct one. It requires no hypothetical advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial visitors. It relies solely on well-understood, if remarkably precise, natural, chemical, and geological processes. Furthermore, skeptics point out that many of the most perfectly grooved spheres that circulate in popular media and alternative history books are often the most exceptional examples, hand-picked for their startling appearance. In reality, the vast majority of these objects found are far less symmetrical, often lumpy and irregular, which is exactly what one would expect from a natural formation process. The debate over the Klerksdorp spheres ultimately hinges on this conflict between perception and process. Our human brains are hardwired to see patterns and intention, especially when confronted with shapes that resemble our own manufactured objects. A grooved sphere looks like a bearing or a tool, so we instinctively assume it must be one. Yet, the natural world is full of complex geometric patterns, from the hexagons of a honeycomb to the spiral of a nautilus shell, that are created without any conscious design. The Klerksdorp spheres serve as a powerful reminder that nature is the ultimate master of form, capable of producing artifacts of stunning precision that challenge our very definitions of what is natural and what is made. Our journey through the artifacts of the unexplained now takes us from the abstract perfection of stone spheres to the walls of an ancient Egyptian temple, where a single enigmatic carving has sparked a debate that pits traditional mythology against radical technological reinterpretation. Deep within the crypts of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a site dedicated to the goddess of joy, love, and motherhood, lies a relief that seems strikingly out of place with our standard image of the ancient world. The scene, carved with crisp detail into the sandstone, shows a large, wavy serpent emerging from the petals of a lotus flower. But this flower is not floating in a pond. It is enclosed within an elongated, bulbous object that looks remarkably like a giant, transparent glass tube. This tube is held aloft by a supporting pillar, and a kneeling god grasps the entire assembly. From the far end of the tube, a cable-like cord seems to trail away, connecting to a box upon which a baboon-like god is perched. To a modern eye, the composition is instantly, uncannily familiar. it looks for all the world like a depiction of an electric light bulb with the serpent serving as the glowing filament. This interpretation, popularized in the latter half of the 20th century, forms the core of the Dendera light theory. Proponents argue that the components of the relief align perfectly with the parts of a Crookes tube, an early type of electrical light source. In this reading, the large tube is the glass bulb, the wavy snake is the filament emitting light, the pillar is an insulating stand, the box with the baboon is a power source or generator, and the cable is an insulated wire. They point to the absence of soot in the deep, interior chambers of Egyptian temples like Dendera as potential evidence that the builders used a form of electric lighting rather than torches, which would have covered the elaborate ceiling paintings in black residue. The theory suggests that the Egyptians possessed a lost form of electro-technological knowledge, which they encoded in their sacred art, depicting it symbolically because the concept was too advanced for a literal representation. Mainstream Egyptology, however, offers a much different and thoroughly documented explanation rooted in the complex world of Egyptian religion. Scholars identify the scene as a classic representation of a foundational creation myth. The lotus flower in Egyptian symbolism is associated with the dawn, rebirth, and the very moment of creation as it emerges pristine from the primordial waters. The serpent is not a filament but a manifestation of the god Harsomptus, a form of the deity Horus, and it symbolizes the divine, life-giving energy of the sun. The entire ensemble, the serpent emerging from the lotus within the tube, is interpreted as the moment the sun god is born each morning, bringing light to the world. The supporting pillar is the sacred Djed pillar, a symbol of stability and the backbone of the god Osiris, and the cable is more likely a ceremonial rope or a stylized representation of the serpent's tail. The baboon on the box is the god Thoth, the deity of wisdom and writing, presiding over the sacred scene. This mythological interpretation is consistent with hundreds of other reliefs throughout Egypt and is supported by the accompanying hieroglyphic texts which speak of cosmic events and divine births, not technological manuals. The debate, therefore, hinges on a clash of perspectives. Are we seeing a literal, albeit symbolic, diagram of a forgotten technology, or are we projecting our modern understanding of electricity onto an ancient spiritual allegory? The argument for an ancient light bulb is severely weakened by the complete absence of any physical evidence. No ancient Egyptian light bulbs, wires, batteries comparable to the Baghdad find, or generators have ever been discovered in any archaeological context. Furthermore, the technological leap required to create a working, high-vacuum glass tube with a reliable power source is immense, and there is no evidence of the supporting infrastructure or scientific principles necessary for such an achievement. The soot-free walls of temples can be explained by the use of reflective mirrors to channel sunlight deep into corridors, or by the use of oil lamps with carefully designed wicks and containers that minimized smoke. Ultimately, the power of the Dendera light relief lies in its arresting visual ambiguity. It is a perfect example of how an image can be interpreted through two entirely different lenses. For those inclined to believe in lost ancient technologies, it is a tantalizing piece of circumstantial evidence, a glimpse of a reality we have yet to fully comprehend. For Egyptologists, it is a beautiful and profound religious statement, a testament to the Egyptians' sophisticated ability to express cosmic truths through art. The relief does not provide a clear answer, but instead invites us to contemplate the line between our modern perceptions and the ancient world view, reminding us that the symbols of the past can sometimes shine a light that reveals more about our own desires than about the secrets they were intended to hold. Shifting our focus from the grand scale of temples and spheres, we arrive at an archaeological site that offers a different kind of mystery, one not of immense size but of unsettling form. In the dusty plains of what is now Iraq near the ancient city of Ur, lies the site of Al-Ubaid, which gives its name to a prehistoric culture that flourished from about 5,500 to 4,000 years before the Common Era. The Ubaid people are considered one of the earliest foundations of what would later become the Great Sumerian civilization. They were among the first to establish permanent settlements, develop extensive irrigation for agriculture, and build the earliest versions of the mud brick temples that would evolve into the iconic ziggurats. Their artifacts are typically what you might expect from such an early culture: simple pottery, clay sickles, and votive offerings. But among these everyday items, archaeologists have unearthed a collection of figurines so bizarre and distinct that they seem to belong to an entirely different world. These are the Ubaid lizardmen, and they present a puzzle that is as much about perception as it is about archaeology. The figurines are made of terracotta or clay and are typically only a few inches tall, but their impact is far greater than their modest size would suggest. Their features are consistently and strikingly non-human. They possess elongated, cone-shaped heads that slope backward with no indication of hair. Their faces are dominated by large, almond-shaped eyes that slant upwards, giving them an alert, almost reptilian appearance. The bodies are slender and often androgynous, with the shoulders held back in a distinctive posture. Some of the figures are depicted naked, while others wear simple skirts or loincloths. What makes them even more intriguing is their activity. Many are shown in dynamic poses, holding what appear to be tools or weapons. Others are depicted in intimate, human-like scenes, such as a female figure nursing an infant that shares the same bizarre, lizard-like features. This combination of the alien and the familiar is profoundly disorienting. We are not looking at abstract symbols or mythical beasts. We are looking at beings that are portrayed going about the daily business of life, yet they are utterly unlike any human depiction found in the region before or since. So, who or what do these figurines represent? Mainstream archaeology provides a rational, cultural interpretation. The predominant theory is that these are highly stylized representations of human beings, most likely high-ranking priests or priestesses engaged in religious rituals. The elongated skulls, according to this view, could symbolize the practice of artificial cranial deformation, a well-documented tradition in many ancient cultures where an infant skull was bound to create a distinctive, elongated shape that denoted nobility or a special connection to the gods. The almond-shaped eyes might represent the application of heavy coal eyeliner, commonly used in the region for protection from the sun and for ritual purposes. In this context, the figurines are not portraits of lizard people, but symbolic depictions of a spiritual elite, their altered physical forms signaling their elevated status and their role as intermediaries between the human world and the divine. The poses showing them holding tools could then be interpreted as ceremonial objects, and the nursing scenes simply emphasize fertility and the continuity of the community. However, the sheer consistency and strangeness of these features have inevitably fueled more speculative theories. For proponents of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, the Ubaid lizardmen are potential evidence of direct interaction with a non-human intelligence. They ask a compelling question: if these are merely stylized humans, why do they look so radically different from every other human representation created by the Ubaid culture and the Sumerians who followed? The theory suggests that the figurines could be literal depictions of a race of reptilian beings, either visitors from another world or an indigenous, intelligent species that has since vanished from the historical record. These beings, the idea goes, could have been the source of the advanced knowledge that propelled the sudden rise of civilization in Mesopotamia, with their likenesses preserved in clay by the awestruck humans who encountered them. A third, more nuanced possibility lies in the realm of mythology and shamanism. The lizard and the snake are powerful, primal symbols found in cultures across the globe, often representing regeneration, healing, and primordial wisdom because of their ability to shed their skin. It is possible that the Ubaid people were creating representations of their gods or ancestral spirits, who were conceived as having a hybrid human-reptilian form. These figurines would not be portraits of literal creatures, but symbolic vessels meant to embody these powerful concepts. They might have been used in household shrines to invoke protection, fertility, or a connection to a mythic past. This interpretation allows the figurines to be both deeply strange and firmly rooted in a symbolic worldview that we simply no longer share. The Ubaid lizardmen, therefore, stand at a fascinating crossroads. They challenge us to decipher the intentions of a people 7,000 years removed from us. Are we looking at art imitating life, no matter how unconventional that life may have been? Or are we looking at art representing belief, a complex spiritual idea given a tangible and, to our eyes, deeply unsettling form? The answer remains hidden within the silent, slanted eyes of these enigmatic clay figures. But what if a single, unassuming piece of metal could challenge not just a chapter of history, but the entire timeline of human metallurgy? This brings us to a small, wedge-shaped object that carries a paradox as heavy as lead. In 1974, construction workers were excavating a site on the banks of the Meuse River near the Romanian town of Ayad. Buried deep, approximately 35 feet down, they uncovered 3 artifacts nestled together in a layer of ancient sand. 2 of them were easy to identify: fossilized bones belonging to a mastodon, a massive elephant-like creature that went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. But the third object was a complete mystery. It was a hard, dark, wedge-shaped piece of metal about 8 inches long, 5 inches wide, and 3 inches thick. It was found alongside the ancient bones, seemingly sealed within the same undisturbed geological stratum, a layer that geologists initially estimated to be around 20,000 years old. The object was sent for analysis, and the results were, to put it mildly, baffling. The wedge was composed primarily of aluminum, an exceptionally pure aluminum alloy containing 11 other elements, including copper, zinc, and silicon. This in itself wouldn't be strange if it weren't for one critical fact. Aluminum, despite being the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, is never found in its pure metallic form in nature. It is always bonded with other elements in compounds like bauxite. Isolating pure aluminum requires a complex industrial process involving extremely high voltage electrolysis, a technology that was not invented until 1886. Before that, aluminum was considered a precious metal, more valuable than gold. So, the immediate, staggering question is this: how did a man-made aluminum alloy end up buried alongside the remains of an extinct animal in a layer of earth dating back to the last ice age? The mystery deepens when we examine the object's condition. The entire wedge was encased in a very thick layer of aluminum oxide, a type of protective coating that forms when aluminum is exposed to the air. The thickness of this layer was significant. Some experts argued that for such a layer to develop, the object would have needed to be exposed to the elements for a very long time, potentially thousands or even tens of thousands of years. This seemed to support the idea that the wedge was genuinely ancient, a relic from a period when, according to our history books, humans were hunter-gatherers using simple stone tools, utterly incapable of smelting any metal, let alone one as technologically demanding as aluminum. This impossible timeline has, of course, fueled extraordinary theories. The most sensational is the claim that the Ayad wedge is a piece of evidence for a prehistoric advanced civilization, perhaps even the legendary Atlantis. Proponents suggest that a lost culture possessed scientific knowledge far beyond what we credit to ancient peoples, and that this wedge could be a fragment of a tool or a component from a sophisticated machine. Others, looking skyward, have proposed it could be a piece of landing gear from an extraterrestrial spacecraft that visited Earth during the Pleistocene epoch, a theory that, while captivating, exists entirely in the realm of speculation without a shred of corroborating evidence. The scientific and skeptical community, however, points to a much more plausible, if less romantic, explanation. The most widely accepted theory is that the Ayod wedge is not ancient at all, but a piece of modern machinery that simply ended up in an old geological context. The object's shape and composition are highly suggestive of a specific industrial part. Many experts have identified it as the tooth from a modern excavator or a heavy-duty digging bucket, likely from the 1930s or 40s. The alloy composition is consistent with alloys used in such machinery for its strength and resistance to abrasion. So, how did a 20th century excavator tooth get buried 35 feet deep next to mastodon bones? The answer could lie in the very activity that uncovered it: construction. The site had been heavily worked over the decades. It is entirely possible that an excavator tooth broke off and fell into a deep pit or a sediment deposit during earlier construction work in the 19th or early 20th century. Over time, natural processes like siltation and the movement of earth could have buried it further, eventually placing it in close proximity to the much older mastodon bones. This kind of stratigraphic mixing is a known phenomenon in archaeology, where objects from different time periods can become jumbled together, creating the illusion of a single, simultaneous deposit. The credibility of the entire mystery hinges on the initial geological report. The original claim of a 20,000-year-old undisturbed layer is the foundation upon which the anomaly is built. However, the details of that initial geological assessment are frustratingly vague and have never been fully published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. The precise methods used to date the sand layer are unclear, and the exact relationship between the wedge and the mastodon bones at the moment of discovery is poorly documented. Without clear photographs and detailed stratigraphic maps from the excavation site, it is impossible to rule out the possibility of contamination or a misinterpretation of the soil layers. Furthermore, subsequent testing on the oxide layer's age has been inconclusive, as the rate of oxidation can vary dramatically depending on environmental factors like soil acidity and moisture, making it an unreliable clock. The Ayod wedge, therefore, remains a compelling what-if story. It is a classic example of an out-of-place artifact whose mystery is sustained not by overwhelming evidence, but by gaps in the historical record and the powerful allure of an impossible conclusion. It challenges us to be meticulous in our methods and reminds us that sometimes the most intriguing mysteries are not about what we find, but about the story we choose to tell about how it got there. Yet, the mysteries of pre-Columbian America extend far beyond monumental architecture into the realm of objects so small and intricate they demand to be held in the hand to be fully appreciated. One such artifact, the genetic disc, presents a puzzle that is microscopic in its detail but cosmic in its implications. Discovered in Colombia, this remarkable object is a disc made of a hard, black stone known as lyddite, roughly the diameter of a large dinner plate. What sets it apart and what has sparked fervent debate is the astonishingly precise and complex imagery carved onto both of its faces. To the untrained modern eye, the scenes are unmistakably biological. One side appears to depict the very fundamentals of life, clear representations of a sperm cell approaching an ovum, followed by sequential stages of a fertilized egg dividing, mirroring the process of cell division or mitosis that every student of biology learns today. The other side of the disc continues this narrative, showing a developing fetus in various positions, seemingly illustrating the stages of gestation within the womb, culminating in the image of a baby. Interspersed among these are carvings of human figures, as if placing this biological journey within the context of a full life cycle. The immediate and staggering question is how a prehistoric culture, working thousands of years ago without the aid of glass lenses, let alone powerful microscopes, could have observed and recorded processes that are invisible to the naked human eye. The level of detail is so specific that it seems to demand a scientific understanding of human reproduction that was not achieved in the Western world until the 19th century. This has led to theories that are as radical as they are compelling. Some researchers propose that the creators of the disk possessed a lost, sophisticated knowledge of biology, perhaps gained through advanced spiritual practices or shamanic journeys that allowed them to perceive realities beyond normal sight. More speculatively, proponents of the ancient astronaut hypothesis suggest the disk could be a teaching aid, a record of knowledge given to a native culture by extraterrestrial visitors who sought to explain the miracle of human creation. In this view, the genetic disk is not a product of ancient science, but a relic of an otherworldly tutorial. Mainstream archaeology, however, urges a significant dose of caution, pointing to the powerful tendency of pareidolia, the human instinct to see familiar patterns in ambiguous shapes. Scholars argue that we must be extremely careful about interpreting ancient symbols through the narrow lens of our own modern scientific framework. What we clearly identify as a sperm cell might have represented a tadpole, a seed, or a purely abstract symbol of life force to the people who carved it. The figures we see as a developing fetus could be stylized representations of a corn god, a common motif in pre-Columbian art, with the curved form symbolizing growth and fertility rather than a specific biological stage. The life cycle could be a symbolic narrative of spiritual transformation, death, and rebirth, themes that are central to many indigenous cosmologies. The true meaning may be allegorical, not anatomical, using forms from the natural world to express complex philosophical ideas about the origin of life and the journey of the soul. This clash of interpretations is what makes the genetic disk so fascinating. It exists at the intersection of what we can objectively observe and what we subjectively believe. The carvings are undeniably there, and their resemblance to modern biological diagrams is uncanny. Yet, without any written records or cultural context from the civilization that produced it, a culture that remains unidentified, we are left to decode its message based on our own assumptions about the past. Is it a literal biological textbook proving a forgotten chapter of scientific history, or is it a profound spiritual artifact whose true meaning we have lost because we are too quick to see it as science? The genetic disk does not provide an answer, but instead holds up a mirror to our own desire to find our reality reflected in the mysteries of the ancient world. It challenges us to consider whether our ancestors saw the universe in a way that was fundamentally different from our own, a way that blended the physical and the spiritual into a single, coherent whole, recorded not in data points but in symbols carved in stone. Tucked away in a coal mine in Wolfsegg, Austria in 1885, a miner's routine work revealed an object that seemed to defy the very ground it was pulled from. As workers broke apart a large block of tertiary-era coal, they found a small, heavy, and almost perfectly cube-shaped piece of iron embedded deep within it. This object, which would become known as the Wolfsegg iron or the Salzburg cube, presented an immediate and profound contradiction. The coal seam from which it came was reliably dated to a period stretching from 20 to 60 million years ago, a time when the ancestors of humanity were small, primitive mammals, and the very idea of metalworking lay tens of millions of years in the future. How could a manufactured-looking object be found sealed inside a substance that predated human intelligence by such an immense span of geological time? The cube itself is a compelling artifact to behold. It measures roughly 2.5 inches on each side and weighs just over 1.5 pounds. Its most striking feature is its geometric form. While not machine perfect, it possesses remarkably sharp edges and relatively flat faces, giving it an appearance that feels intentionally shaped. The surface is pitted and grooved, and it bears a deep indentation running around its center. Chemical analysis has revealed it is composed primarily of iron, with significant traces of nickel and carbon, a composition that is consistent with a type of meteoritic iron known as kamacite. This specific metallic fingerprint is a crucial piece of the puzzle because it points directly toward a celestial rather than a human origin. The scientific explanation that has gained the most traction is that the wolf's egg iron is a natural geological formation called a pyrite nodule, later replaced by meteoric iron. Here is how this fascinating process is believed to work. In the ancient swampy environments that would eventually become coal beds, the mineral pyrite or iron sulfide can sometimes form in concretionary shapes. As plant matter compacts over eons, dissolved minerals can precipitate around a central nucleus, slowly building up a solid mass. Pyrite, often called fool's gold for its metallic luster, has a cubic crystal structure which can naturally lead to the formation of rough, cube-like nodules. Then, over millions of years, a secondary geological process can occur. If a meteorite rich in nickel iron impacts the region, its material can be weathered and dissolved into groundwater. This mineral-rich water can then seep through the coal seams, and through a chemical replacement process known as pseudomorphism, the dissolved meteoric iron can gradually replace the original pyrite, molecule by molecule, while perfectly preserving the original nodule shape. The result is a lump of meteoric iron that inherits the startlingly geometric form of the pyrite crystal it replaced. This elegant explanation accounts for both the object's strange context and its unusual composition. However, for those who are skeptical of this natural sequence, the cube's sharp edges and near-perfect form remain a significant point of contention. Natural formations, even pseudomorphs, tend to be more rounded and irregular. The presence of that distinct central groove is also difficult to explain through purely natural processes. It looks for all the world like a mark left by a tool. These anomalous features have made the wolf's egg iron a cornerstone for alternative historical theories. Proponents of advanced prehistoric civilizations argue that it could be a fragment of a manufactured tool, perhaps from a culture like Atlantis, whose existence was wiped clean by a global cataclysm, with only a few of its artifacts surviving, encased in rock and coal. Others, looking to the stars, have suggested it could be a piece of debris from an ancient extraterrestrial spacecraft or mining operation, lost on Earth during a time when our planet was a very different world. The debate was further complicated by the object's own history. After its discovery, it was displayed in the Carolino Augusteum Museum in Salzburg, where it was initially labeled as meteoritic. Later, it was subjected to analysis that confirmed its nickel-iron content. Yet, the mystery persists not because of what the cube is made of, but because of where it was found. The idea of a natural replacement process, while scientifically plausible, is difficult to prove conclusively for this single, unique object. There are no other identical examples from the same coal seem to compare it to. The wolf's egg iron stands as a solitary enigma, a perfect example of how a single, out-of-place artifact can ignite centuries of speculation. It challenges us to weigh the elegant explanations of geology against the tantalizing possibility that our planet's history is far stranger and perhaps far more populated than we have ever dared to imagine. And now, our exploration of the unexplained takes flight, soaring from the static enigmas of stone and metal to a collection of golden artifacts that seem to defy gravity itself. Deep within the river valleys of Colombia, the Quimbaya civilization flourished from around 1000 to 1500 of the Common Era, becoming master goldsmiths renowned for their intricate lost wax casting technique. They produced thousands of small, detailed figurines, most of which are confidently identified by archaeologists as stylized representations of the natural world that surrounded them: frogs, lizards, butterflies, birds, and fish. These are beautiful, symbolic objects that fit comfortably within our understanding of a pre-Columbian culture's artistic expression. But then there are the outliers. Among this menagerie of familiar forms are a handful of objects so radically different in their design that they stop you in your tracks. These particular figurines possess a sleek, aerodynamic profile that looks less like any creature from the Colombian rainforest and more like something you would see on the deck of a modern aircraft carrier. The most famous of these anomalous objects, often referred to as the Quimbaya airplanes or jets, display features that are undeniably aviation-like. They have broad, triangular delta wings that are swept back, a distinct vertical tail fin that stands upright like a stabilizer, and a fuselage that tapers to a point. Some even have a raised, bulbous section on the top that perfectly suggests a cockpit canopy. When you hold one of these artifacts in your hand, the resemblance to a modern fighter jet or a delta-winged space shuttle is so uncanny that it feels intentional. This visual similarity is so powerful that it has inspired a wave of investigation far outside the field of archaeology. In the 1990s, a pair of German aerodynamics enthusiasts, Algund Einbohm and Peter Belting, decided to put the theory to the test. They created precise, scaled-up models of the Quimbaya artifacts, not as solid trinkets but as lightweight balsa wood gliders, carefully balancing the weight to match the proportions of the original gold objects. The results of their flight tests were startling. When launched by hand, the models didn't just fall to the ground, they soared. They demonstrated stable, aerodynamic flight, gliding for considerable distances with ease. Belting, a former pilot, even equipped one of the larger models with a jet engine and a landing gear, and reportedly flew it successfully via remote control, proving that the design was not only airworthy but capable of powered flight. For proponents of alternative history, these experiments were definitive proof. They argued that the Quimbaya people could not have accidentally sculpted a perfectly functional aircraft design. They must have been depicting something they had actually seen. The mainstream archaeological perspective, however, remains firmly grounded in a more zoological interpretation. Scholars point out that these figurines are part of a continuum of artistic expression, and that the airplane shapes are almost certainly highly stylized representations of birds, insects, or even seed pods. A bird in flight with its wings swept back can easily be abstracted into a delta wing shape. The upright tail fin could be a stylized bird's tail, and the so-called cockpit could represent a head. They argue that our modern eyes, living in an age of aviation, are quick to see airplanes in these shapes due to a psychological phenomenon called pareidolia, where we perceive familiar patterns in ambiguous stimuli. Furthermore, they emphasize that not a single other piece of evidence suggests the Quimbaya possessed any knowledge of aviation technology, no tools, no infrastructure, no references to flight in any form. The aerodynamic success of the models, while intriguing, is seen as a coincidence. They argue that many streamlined, symmetrical shapes will glide if built properly. It does not mean the original artists intended to design a flying machine. The figurines, in this view, are exquisite examples of abstract art, their true meaning lost to time but rooted in the flora and fauna of their world, not in a hangar. This leaves us with a fascinating standoff between two ways of seeing. Is the Quimbaya artifact a bird or is it a plane? The answer may never be fully settled. The artifact's power lies in its ability to be both things simultaneously, depending on the lens through which you view it. It serves as a perfect metaphor for the entire field of anomalous archaeology, highlighting the constant tension between orthodox explanations that rely on cultural context and more speculative ideas that dare to imagine a different kind of past. These small golden objects challenge us to consider the nature of inspiration itself. Could an artist, by observing the natural flow of air over a bird's wing, intuitively arrive at a shape that would take engineers centuries to calculate? Or does their existence point to a more startling possibility, a fleeting encounter with a technology so advanced it could only be recorded as magic, immortalized in gold by a people trying to make sense of the impossible? The Quimbaya airplanes remain airborne in our imagination, not because they provide answers, but because they keep a thrilling question aloft. And so we arrive at our final and perhaps most controversial artifact, a mystery that forces us to confront not only the secrets of the past, but also the powerful human desires that can create mysteries where none may exist. In the 1960s, in the small Peruvian town of Ica, a local physician named Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquia began to receive a curious stream of gifts from a farmer. They were stones, smooth, gray andesite rocks that had been meticulously carved with intricate images. At first, the carvings seemed to depict familiar scenes from ancient Peruvian life. But as Dr. Cabrera's collection grew into the thousands, the images on the stones became increasingly, astonishingly bizarre. They showed human figures interacting with creatures that bore an unmistakable resemblance to dinosaurs like Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and pterodactyls. Other stones illustrated what appeared to be highly advanced medical procedures, detailed diagrams of open-heart surgery, cesarean sections, and even complex organ transplants. There were maps of the world showing unknown continents and images of telescopes and advanced technology that seemed to belong to a science fiction novel, not to a pre-Columbian culture. Dr. Cabrera, captivated by his growing collection, developed a grand and extraordinary theory. He became convinced that these stones were not mere artifacts, but a vast, encoded library left behind by a lost civilization he called Glyptolithica. This ancient race, he proposed, possessed a technology and understanding of biology that rivaled or even surpassed our own. They had achieved a peaceful coexistence with dinosaurs, mastered genetic engineering, and possessed astronomical knowledge that allowed them to map the stars with precision. In his view, this civilization was the true ancestor of humanity, and its history had been wiped clean by a global cataclysm. The Ica stones were the surviving record, a deliberate message meant for future generations to discover. Dr. Cabrera opened a museum in Ica to display his stones, and for a time they became an international sensation, drawing curious visitors and fueling the imaginations of those who believed in alternative histories. The romance of this story, however, was short-lived. The foundation of the mystery began to crumble when the source of the stones was traced back to a single farmer, Basilio Ushuaia. Under pressure from authorities for selling archaeological artifacts, which is illegal in Peru, Ushuaia confessed. He stated that he and other local farmers were the true artists. He demonstrated his technique, showing how he could carve the images into the stones using simple metal tools, and then artificially age the engravings by rubbing them with a paste containing chicken dung and baking them in an oven to create a convincing patina. He explained that he got the ideas from comic books, textbooks, and popular magazines, blending images of dinosaurs with traditional Peruvian motifs to create unique and highly sellable curios for the growing tourist trade. For most archaeologists and scientists, this confession was the final word. The Ica stones were a hoax, a clever and profitable scheme that preyed on the gullible. The case was considered closed, a textbook example of why provenance and scientific scrutiny are essential in archaeology. Yet, as with so many of these tales, a sliver of doubt persists, kept alive by a few stubborn questions that the hoax explanation doesn't entirely smooth away. Proponents of the stone's authenticity point to the sheer, staggering volume of the collection. Dr. Cabrera claimed to possess over 15,000 carved stones. Could a small group of farmers, even working for decades, have produced such an immense body of work, each stone featuring unique and often highly complex illustrations? Furthermore, some independent researchers who have examined the stones argue that the patina, the thin, weathered film that forms on rock surfaces over time, appears to be present inside the carved grooves themselves. If the engravings were as recent as the 1960s, they contend, the patina in the cuts should be noticeably different from the patina on the surrounding stone surface. Claims have been made that certain stones, when analyzed, show this uniform aging, suggesting the carvings could be centuries old. These arguments, while marginal, are enough to fuel continued debate in certain circles. Ultimately, the legacy of the Ica stones is less about the stones themselves and more about what they represent. They stand as a powerful cautionary tale about the fine line between mystery and misinformation. They remind us of the immense appeal of a past that is more exciting and mysterious than the one presented by conventional science. The human mind naturally gravitates towards grand narratives of lost worlds and advanced ancestors, and this desire can sometimes override critical thinking. The Ica stones demonstrate how easily a compelling story, even one built on a fabrication, can capture the public imagination and persist long after it has been debunked. They challenge us to be both open-minded and rigorously skeptical, to cherish the genuine mysteries of the ancient world while carefully discerning them from the clever creations of human hands. In the end, they are a testament not to a lost civilization, but to the enduring power of a good story, and a permanent reminder that the greatest mysteries are not always buried in the earth. Sometimes they are woven from our own deepest hopes and curiosities. And so we reach the end of our expedition, a journey that has taken us across continents and millennia, from the depths of the sea to the heights of the Andes. These 25 artifacts are more than just curious relics. They are profound question marks etched in stone, metal, and clay. Each one, from the celestial gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the impossible purity of the Iron Pillar of Delhi, represents a crack in the smooth facade of our historical narrative. We have encountered objects that hint at lost sciences, like the potential battery from Baghdad, and artifacts that whisper of impossible journeys, like the Norse penny in Maine. We have stared into the unreadable script of the Voynich Manuscript and marveled at the monumental precision of Saqqara, each challenging our assumptions about the limits of ancient ingenuity. What makes these mysteries so enduring is not necessarily that they defy all explanation, but that they live in the compelling space between what we know and what we might imagine. For every artifact, we are presented with a choice. We can embrace the orthodox scientific explanations, the Antikythera Mechanism as a testament to Greek genius, the Nazca lines as a sacred calendar, the Dendera light as a solar myth. These interpretations are often elegant, grounded in cultural context and Occam's razor, and they remind us that our ancestors were far more innovative than we sometimes give them credit for. Their achievements, even within understood technological frameworks, were extraordinary. Yet, we can also entertain the more radical possibilities that the Saqqara bird is a model glider, that the Piri Rise map traces an ancient, ice-free coastline, or that the Quimbaya artifacts represent something seen, not just imagined. These ideas, while often lacking conclusive proof, ignite our sense of wonder and force us to question the completeness of our historical record. They suggest that history might not be a linear march of progress, but a series of cycles with peaks of knowledge that were reached, lost, and then forgotten. This journey reminds us that the field of archaeology is not static. It is a living, breathing discipline that evolves with every new discovery. The past is not a sealed tomb, but a landscape constantly being reinterpreted. What was considered a hoax yesterday might be reevaluated tomorrow with new technology, and what seems an insoluble mystery today might find a simple, elegant explanation next year. The true value of these enigmatic objects lies in their ability to keep us curious, to prevent us from becoming complacent in our understanding of the human story. They are invitations to keep digging, to keep questioning, and to remain open to the possibility that our past is richer, stranger, and more complex than we have yet dared to dream. Now we turn the investigation over to you. After exploring these 25 captivating puzzles, which one resonates most deeply with you? Do you find the mechanical certainty of the Antikythera Mechanism the most convincing evidence of a lost technology, or does the biological intimacy of the genetic disk haunt your imagination? Perhaps the sheer, tangible mystery of the Shroud of Turin, balanced between faith and science, leaves you with more questions than answers. We want to hear your thoughts. Which of these artifacts do you believe points most strongly to a truth we have not yet fully accepted? Share your theories and favorite mysteries in the comments below. We love reading these discussions and seeing the conversation unfold. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the edges of history, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more content that explores the unknown, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an adventure. Thank you for exploring the unexplained with us.